You had me go.
Mom, if you're listening, could you please subscribe? Actually, this is so I'm going to tell the story now.
Yeah.
But this was a huge aha I had the other day. So I was talking to, I'm not going to disclose her name because I don't want to embarrass her, but I was talking to a business partner of mine, and she was like talking to me about the podcast. She's like, "Hey, are you having fun? I've been listening to the shows. It's kind of cool." And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Hey, I really like the show with Tyler Lafferty. Did you know that like he's who I had a business transaction with a while back?" And I said, "No, I didn't know that." So we're talking. She goes, "Yeah, I actually liked that episode." And I was like, "Oh, sweet, you gave me a like?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, did you subscribe?" And she goes, "Well, no, I'm just not sure if I'm ready to like subscribe yet." And I was like, "What are you being all stingy with your subscribe button? Like, like, I don't know." And she's like, "Well, no, I just don't know if I want to pay money." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Wait a minute." Subscribe. I go, you know that if you subscribe to like a podcast, you don't actually have to pay for it, right?" And she was like, "Really?" Like, and she had no idea. And I guess for me, it was like, we both laughed about it. And I think there's certain podcasts that you have to pay for. Or maybe
it's like for the additional stuff. Yeah, right. The bonus content.
But for the most part, for our listeners out there, or anybody who maybe is too embarrassed to admit this, if you thought that you had to pay money to subscribe to a podcast, I would say 99% of all podcasts are free.
Yeah.
And the subscription button, it's like so the like button is like, I like this video or this episode. The subscription button is like, if you want to follow along.
Yeah, and get the newest episodes released, right? Yeah.
And I think that's maybe, I don't know. So since then, I've run this past like a few other people. And I'm surprised, like there's actually some other people, like I get that deer in the headlight look and I'm like, wait, you didn't know that either, right?
That's a confusing word, right? Subscription.
Yeah, so follow is probably a better
Follow's
word,
a good
maybe.
Word. I like follow.
But yeah, if you're like, I'm a YouTuber, but yeah, on YouTube, like I subscribe, I'm probably subscribed to 50 channels, 40 channels. And
well, it's just nice. It puts it all in one spot so then you can easily access it. And
yeah, because sometimes I get on YouTube to watch something funny or entertaining. Other times it's like I specifically go to get like information on fishing or hunting. And so I'm like, oh, I want to go to my Addicted Fishing channel. Shout out to Addicted Fishing. I just like their content. So yeah.
Well, one thing learned today.
Yeah.
Don't fear the subscribe button.
Yeah, please. At any rate, so Jordan, we're doing a little Q&A session today. We've been doing this podcast a while, but I think that what's cool is we've got some great guests, and then we've also been able to mix it up with just like some Q&A between you.
Yeah, I like
stuff.
that. That's
yeah.
good.
And so I just wanted to start off by today and like you kind of going with the flow of like, what are you currently working on and what are you seeing in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded question. There's so much to that. I think one of the big ones we're working on that I probably have gotten more press you don't want with it, but it was the Peyton Building. So Cochinito Tacos. Yeah, we touched on a little. It's by far one of the hardest ones I've ever had to tackle. Old building, but the coolest one at the same time.
So give some perspective because I've done this talking to you. And you know the names of all the buildings downtown.
Yeah.
I do not.
Ooh,
and I've been in real estate for like 20 years, dude. And
I've been labeling them.
Oh, meet me at the whatever Kelsey building or something.
Point.
And I'm like, yeah, totally. And then I'm on my phone Googling like,
where is this?
Where's the Peyton building?
Is that an A or an E?
Yeah. So tell us, so what's the Peyton Building?
Perfect. So it is a building right downtown, 1 block south of the Riverfront Mall. You can't miss it. It's 7 stories, really cool old brick building.
On the corner of Main?
Post.
Oh, Post.
Post and Sprague. And it actually goes block to block. So it's actually from Riverside to Sprague. Okay. And so it's right next to the STA.
From the Davenport?
Right next to the, kitty corner from the Davenport Hotel.
Okay.
So when you come out the door, it's that 7-story brick building. I'd worked with an investor to kind of buy it initially, and then he didn't want to go through the development part. And I was like, oh no, we can tackle this one. This is gonna be great. Like I've done smaller ones. How much more difficult could this be? And it's way more difficult. Historic buildings don't scale. That's what I was
saying. It was already on the historic registry
so the
before
exterior,
you bought it?
Complete exterior is, but the interior wasn't. And so one of the things we thought was, okay, hey, we can get some tax credits that they give you for rehabbing old historic buildings. And basically the idea was convert all the office space into 96 apartment units. And so upstairs, it's on the top floors, 2 through 7, we'll have 96 mix of studios, 1 beds, 2 beds, really cool amenity spaces from like a dog wash area. They have these cool light wells. So we'll actually have a dog park in the facility.
Oh, nice.
Incubator space, Zoom room space, a theater, fitness room. And so one of our ideas was to differentiate in this market is I think a tenant's going to want more amenities. In their location. So I think you used to be able to, because we didn't have enough housing, just put a building up somewhere. And I think going forward, we have such good products, such good tenants basically coming in that I think that's going to be a differentiator. And so when we bought it, kind of our biggest fear was actually downtown in general. Was, can downtown cleanup, can that be a thing?
Yeah.
And
I feel like I don't know about you. I feel like it has a little bit.
I
like,
moved down here and I'm like, I have a really good perspective on it now.
I feel like a couple years, like post COVID 22, 23, like downtown was getting to a point where I was like, dude, this is bad, right? Like, you know, like even a person who's in real estate, and I'm kind of a supporter of downtown, and I like to go downtown for beer or lunch or something just to support, like, you know, but there was a point where I was like, man, this is getting kind of like not. I mean, like I'm gonna premise this. I'm a healthy adult pseudo fit male who probably doesn't get like scared or like in fear of my you know, personal being much. But you're like the apex at there, right? Like if I'm a kid, if I'm a mom, if I'm a
dark out
single, dude, it was getting bad. But anyways, it seems like it's turned around. I feel like it has.
I think to a part, right? It's also, it just takes time. Like we also forget that for a long time, downtown was where they just stacked a lot of the low income housing, the cheaper buildings, the things like that. And then it started with some investment in the mall, clean that up, the park, clean that up. You got the new stadium over there. And so I think it's just one of those, you want to, like everything else in our community, snap your fingers and all of a sudden you have a building there. Or all of a sudden it changed. And I just think this is one process that isn't going to be fixed by putting a building in. But one thing I started realizing was as I moved downtown was like, I care so much more about downtown. Like what the streets look like. I clean up garbage around buildings now on my walks. And I'm like, what if we just brought 96 more people? What if we brought 1,000 more people that had that same concern? So I think it's a little bit of a cart and horse, which came first type argument. But what we also wanted to do was provide housing. I just remember working downtown right out of college, and I was like, I had to park over past the arena. I'd hoof it all the way over to save the extra $5 for parking per day. And I was always thinking like, man, I would live downtown, especially because I wouldn't need a car. I could walk to work. I could do all these. And so what we liked about this location is it's skywalk connected to 3 of the largest offices in Spokane. So like you could be a young professional, live in this building and not even drive, not even go outside if you didn't want to. Have your amenities
I feel like
there.
That's a play for a lot of millennials right there. They don't want to go outside.
I think millennials.
I'm just kidding. I'm not picking on them.
I mean, I am picking on them, but I'm like, but it's that. I think that's kind of the future of it. And so one funny thing about it is, in theory, you could exist in a world that just stayed kind of in that halo.
No, I think downtown's cool, man. I think downtown is it's turned around quite a bit, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So so Peyton Building. You've given me kind of the rough shot of where it is. You're converting office to housing. So you said it was on the historic register, and I think it's worth noting, like I have a building up in Garland, and years ago I thought about putting it on there. You said the inside's not, but the outside is. The outside, just for people listening, is if you put something on a historic register, you're not allowed to actually change any of the facade that's like street facing. So like with my specific building, it was like there was 2 arterials, like I was on the corner of like Garland and Wall, and so I was allowed, I think, to do stuff in the back or on like the alley side, but I wasn't allowed to do anything like street facing, like off a main arterial. And so it just limits any sort of like renovations that you can do.
And you can do it, but it has to stay in line with the historic nature of that building. So like if you want to upgrade windows, they have to be wood framed. And anybody who has never bought a window, the difference between vinyl and wood is like 4 times the cost. And so typically people don't do it because of the cost to do it. But like we're in this room where we have the brick exposed. Well, do you know historically nobody exposed brick? So you can't have this like brick exposed. Nope, because they would have covered it up. Brick wasn't made to be seen. It was just a structural component they used to build. And so then they would fur it out and use plaster walls. So now we're redoing this, and all I want to do is expose all the brick in every unit. Cool brick, and they're like, well, you can do, but you won't get any other tax credits. And so the other one is that exposed ceilings.
So can you cover the brick with brick though?
Yeah, you'd come up, you would do brick, put your wall, and then you'd put brick on top of the Okay. And so I think there's some hurdles that are there. But if I can show that this concept works with it, there's a couple other buildings. But I think I did it kind of right at that peak of a office is crashing, right? And I don't know that's crashing, but there are some buildings that are way more expensive to bring back to an office than they are to convert. But I also don't think you can just go grab a building and convert it to an apartment building. Like think of like the Chase building, which is right downtown, right across from Flat Stick Pub. has the windows, has those pieces, but it has how the building's set up, they're too deep and cavernous. And so you end up with these shotgun style units. And then your layouts are, instead of on mine, there's 650 square foot one bedrooms. You could have 900 square foot just because of that space. And so really we were looking for something with 3 walls of windows. So you're always going to have a dead wall in a building unless it's like center loaded, which means you got to put your elevator somewhere. You got to put all your electrical, all your plumbing, all that chases somewhere. You're either going up the middle of your building, so you have windows on all 4 sides,
right?
Or you're going to take one whole wall of your building and stack it on that. Well, this already had that. The other one was they had already upgraded the windows.
Because it was built for office.
Because it was built, yep. Yeah. And so you had your elevators there. The hardest part about these is that they only had 2 bathrooms per floor, and I have to put 16 bathrooms per floor now. For the units, right?
Yeah.
And so there's
are
things
your
like
mains like big enough to accept
no,
that?
So basically we have to cut the main all the way down. And so then it's basically by the time we're done
with a main all the way up. How big of a main do you have to take?
It'll be a 6 or 8 inch pipe, but yeah. It'll be one of those pieces, but then you go, hey, when water falls 7 stories in a they call it ABS pipe, which is the standard like PVC looking black pipe, it's really loud. So if you're taking a shower on the 7th floor and you use that kind of piping, if it's not insulated on the 2nd floor, it sounds like a thunderstorm's coming down. And now there's 96 of those units. And so there's just a lot of thought that goes into how do you convert one of these buildings. But there are things like these arched windows, cool details in the space. The ceilings are all 11 feet tall in every unit. Every unit will be 10 to 11 feet, right? And so there's things that you could never build it like this again. And it's actually way cheaper just to start from scratch. You never would. You never would. And so I think it's that opportunity of trying to figure out creative ways to repurpose spaces like that. Because then what it did was took the great office tenants that were in there, and now we filled up the other buildings. They all went to a better office type building. And so there's probably a few of those downtown you could do. But this should be an interesting test of that piece.
One of the reasons I like development is because like when I was a kid, I liked building forts. I like to build a fort.
I like the lead in.
And it was always, I grew up rural, so I grew up on a farm, but like we would make the coolest forts out in like the barn or out in like an old chicken, like we just find a reason to build a fort. And the fun was always in building the fort, by the way. Like after the fort was built, like you didn't really like hang out there much. Like there wasn't like
there's nothing to do there. There's no heat. There's nothing.
You're always like taking stuff there to like occupy yourself, and then you're like, oh, that's kind of like. But you'd be like, let's go build another fort somewhere, like in the woods or whatever. Yeah. But dude, I have been having like, and so I love this, but I've had my eye on like the big grain silos, like off division there. I think, man, that would be such a cool conversion to like do something cool with. But like for me, it's like a kid building a fort, but like it's a concrete round cylinder. So talk about like not ideal. Yeah. Like it's round. So, I mean, that's, plumb level square is kind of like a carpenter buddy of mine. He used to help me with renovations and stuff, but he used to do a lot of renovations in Seattle high end. And that was like his mantra. So he was like, listen, he's like, as a carpenter, he's like plumb level square. Everything is plumb level square, plumb level square. Yep. And so it's one of those things where it's like, you're looking at these round cylinders and I'm like, man, that'd be such a cool. Yeah. But I have found, and I don't know about you, but I have found that my ideas end up costing a lot more money than just like the basic Betty stuff, right? So it's like you said, if I wanted 96 units as an example, you could go make them, create them, and build them way cheaper if you just went to a flat piece of dirt, built 96 units, than if you go downtown to a building that's on the historic register and you're like, I'm going to make 96 units in this building, so I can't do these certain things, but I also am like, like the cost gets driven way up because you're not starting from scratch, right? Like that whole plumb level square thing becomes this whole, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, which for me is like exciting and like actually makes me more interested. I'm like, I would rather do that than build new stuff. And it'd be way more lucrative to build new stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, my rule of thumb now is the cooler it is, the more money you lose. So it's kind of where I'm like, the coolest projects are the ones I do the work. Yeah. And so then you kind of balance it. Yeah, exactly. And it's a hard one. The only gamble on a downtown is that eventually you go to any big city and that price per square foot of land, you can't duplicate again. The hard part about like, if you look like Rathdrum Prairie, any of those, you could just go build another development next to the development, next to development. Once you get downtown, there is this barrier to entry that will happen at some point. Even just the number of buildings that have been renovated is up. It's just it takes a little longer, but the price per square foot rental rates are better.
It's also, and I don't know if you vet this with your contractors or whatever, but it's also a niche, I think, in the contracting or construction world, because it is different than new construction. So like my background is much less large scale development than you have.
Yeah.
I've done some development deals, but they're land or they're new construction. So, but I have played a lot in the flip world, and I learned very, well, I would say quickly, but it took me a longer time than I wanted to admit.
Quickly is relative, right?
Yeah, quick is relative. Years, but it was quickly in the grand scheme of things, that there is a drastic difference between guys who can remodel and guys that build new.
Correct.
Like carpenters and contract,
it's different subs. You want a different person. So when we're vetting for a ground up, I think I made a joke today to our lender, and I'm like, the project we're working on, it's a garden style 72 unit project. I'm like, I think a kid could build that one. Right? It's land, everything flows together. Every sub knows when to be there. I mean, your only delays would be supply chains. Things that you anticipated being there, it didn't show up.
And
whereas you could open up a wall,
not real surprise,
once you get out of the ground on a new construction, it goes pretty smooth unless you didn't order like if you're literally delayed on materials. But when you get in these old buildings, every day you rip down a wall or demo, you could find something.
You discover something new, something that you thought in the engineered plans was going to, we'll just do this. And then you're like, you actually can't do this because of whatever reason.
100%. And so you're running different load calcs because we have existing floors that are 100 years old, right? And so it's like, well, instead of using wood frame, which is cheaper, we use this metal framing because it's lighter. Mm-hmm. And so you're making compromises and things like that throughout the whole project, trying to fit literally a square peg in a round hole. And I think that's the biggest difference I've seen.
So when did you start, and how, like, construction, and how long is it going to take?
Yeah, so we started October, really starting demoing. We did some demo before, and it'll be 16, 18 months on a project like that.
So, okay.
Yeah, so our goal would be by middle end of next summer.
Not this coming.
Oh, there's no way,
Yeah.
I mean, demoing it is 4 to 5 months.
Wow.
Because you're taking apart 88,000 square feet
coming out the window, and they're just throwing trash out the windows and like.
Yeah, so you're breaking it down, trying to fit it into that part, getting it cleared out. But the nice part is we don't have to do much exterior work, so it'll be there. Kind of that post-street work with the businesses there to kind of drive traffic through promotion stuff, because I think that's one of the cooler parts about the building is it has that retail first floor that makes it kind of, I think, it'll make it a fun place to live.
Yeah.
But it's probably the biggest one that's taken the most attention to get it there. Some of the other ones.
What's the cost per square foot of renovation and construction on that compared to new construction?
Yeah, so we're building ground up new construction in that 180, 190 a square foot range. I bet by the time we're done with this, it'll be 210, 215. Okay. So not terrible.
That's it's just still not bad.
It's not bad. But again, you got a picture. I already have all the exterior walls, a roof. I have elevators. I already have. I mean, if you had to build, that building again,
exactly. You're not.
But I would say to build 96 units. So let's assume the bottom floor is worth $4 million because it's fully rented. So subtract that from the total. I'm probably 22% more expensive.
Wow.
Than taking a piece of dirt and just building it. Let alone like think about all those loads in a 5-acre site. You can lay down all your equipment, your materials and stuff, and stack it all over your site. Here we have 2 lanes of traffic. And you have to stage it all in.
This brings the thought for me is just but this is mainstream activity that happens in almost every major city in America.
They're just used to it.
They're just used to it. Like if you're doing anything in downtown New York,
it's everywhere. When you walk around, they have scaffolding everywhere. Right. So we just aren't used to it. And again, I don't know that you should get used to it per se, but I know that if you tried to build 7 stories brick right now, you're 300 plus a foot. Right.
At least, I'm sure. Yeah.
And so I think there's some advantages to it, but I think the bigger advantage is I think a downtown has a resurgence, especially as you get more people around you. There's a development on the lower South Hill that the KOZ group, KOZ, is doing. And I think it's almost 200 units. Brumbach just finished a really cool rehab of a historic building there on 6th. So they have studios, really cool loft style ones, and that's 100 plus units.
Is that the one that was the old parking and garage? Or is that
it had the garage next to it. Yeah, okay. It was the 14th, what was it called? Franklin Tower, 6th Street Tower, something like that. Was office.
Okay.
And so you have those ones going. You got Larry Stone building his 12-story tower on the north bank of the old YWCA site. Those would be condos. But once you start infilling something, there's not like a ton of land. So all of a sudden, I did an interview yesterday on the news about doing the...
Brandon, do you have a question?
I have a question.
Oh.
This is very topical. Recently, there's been talk of interim zoning
was about to go into that.
Oh, you're gonna get into it.
Yeah, so I got interviewed.
Brennan is our producer, everybody. So Brennan's back
He's the
there
brains of
listening
this
to
outfit.
us. And he's like, wait, I have a question. I have questions too.
Yeah, so basically they announced it's actually kind of crazy, but they announced that they're going to get rid of height limits in downtown, with the idea of promoting more development because you can build taller, right? In theory, that sounds great. The issue is once you get above certain heights. So I'm going to dive into the boring part real quick, but you can build right now in our code, that pesky little thing, 5 stories of wood frame construction.
Yep.
After the 4th story, you need an elevator. So a lot of times you'll see a 3-story or a 4-story at the most because you didn't need an elevator to get there. Cheapest form of building. Yep. Add the 5th story, and typically it's an enclosed area, but you'll have the elevator. Well, as soon as you go above that, you have to start adding concrete levels. So you can do what's called a podium. So you can add 1 to 2 levels of a podium and then stack that 5 stories of wood on top of it. And that gets you to 7 stories.
So, but you're gonna make the bottom 2 floors out of concrete, right?
Yep.
And then you're gonna put the wood on top.
Exactly.
Right?
And then the biggest thing that you'll see is most office buildings. What's nice about them is they're mostly concrete and steel.
And then at what level though do you have does the fire code change?
Yep. So the 8th. So that's why 7. It's actually 85 feet in the air. And again, if somebody that knows this like an expert, you can obviously correct me, but this is my understanding of it. And so then when you move to that 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th story, it forces you into a construction style that is steel or concrete only.
Right.
And
I always like to break
expensive.
this down because I'm like dummy proof because this is how I understand things. But like for the lay people out there, when you're looking at development, like this is the reason why you tend to see a lot of the similar style buildings or height buildings. Yep. But what happens is like, for example, if you have to put that elevator in, so all of a sudden you're 4 stories. Now I need the elevator.
Yep.
A lot of times you're like, well, now I need stories 5 and 6 to pay for the elevator.
Yes.
Right. So it's better off to build 3 stories instead of 4. Cause even though you get 15 extra units on 4th floor, it's not going to pay for the cost of the elevator. So now if I pay for the cost of the elevator, I got to go 5 and 6. Yep. But all of a sudden you go 5 and 6, but now, oh shoot, I can't do wood framing the whole way. Correct. So now I got to do a podium style. So now I have the increased cost of a concrete foundation on floors 1 and 2, and I have the elevator. So now I got to go 7, 8. Oh shit, I hit 8. Now I got new fire code. So now I got to pay for the cost of constructing this whole building per this new fire code.
Yes.
So now I need like 9 and 10, right? So, but as a developer, obviously you can't just like climb your way to.
No, it doesn't scale that easily.
No, it doesn't.
And that's the hard part is like when here's the biggest reason why. So if you can do 5 through 7, your first 2 floors will be expensive and then your next 5 will be kind of like you're building anywhere you're building. The issue is once you have to build all out of, and this is back to Brennan's question, the reason I don't think it will have any effect unless it's a hotel or some kind of chain that allows it to make kind of daily dollars, is that the cost goes from that 200 to 300 to like 500 to 600 a foot.
And that's per square foot on every foot of
floor,
the entire building, not just the increase.
Exactly.
It's not like you go, I'm going to build all this at 250 and then I'm going to build these top 2 at 500. Yeah. No, the whole building gets built at 500.
And the numbers I heard are actually higher than that, but I think that's kind of the best way to explain it. And so even though you say, hey, build a 50-story tower if you want to, the reality is our rents in Spokane will never justify. Our office rents are cheap. Our rents downtown are getting expensive, but they're not like $4,000 a month like a Seattle.
Right.
And so once you start having rents like that, then you can justify it. So I'm interested to see how Larry's project sells because it's going to be the highest price per square foot, best view, best site. If you're going to do it, if you're going to test that concept, it's there. But he was also only selling 38 of them.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those pieces that I'm interested to see. But I do like the thing I do like about that ordinance is that it's like actively thinking of ways to do it.
38 GU players go pro.
Exactly. That's what you're right. You can call
exactly. A place in Spokane.
Exactly.
Right?
And you'll get some coming. I think we just have a whole new population here in Spokane that'll do it. But I remember the stories that I heard at least was they didn't want them that tall in the park because of the shadows. So there's this big study and argument around shadows on the park.
Like a real life, I don't want to live in your shadow.
It feels like that. A big tall building blocking or shading the park. And the net effect of the shade.
The sun comes from the south, so it would shade the river.
Trust me,
it would shade the other side.
Trust me, I don't know.
Do they know that the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, and sends a shadow?
And it's like, what's it going to do? And I'm like, honestly, at the point we're talking about shadows instead of adding a 18-story building downtown,
There's
I don't know.
Some pissed off fish in the river.
Yeah. And so the only way it's going to happen, and the downside is the net effect, is that rents have to go up to justify it.
It's an interesting, like I said, you get into... so to evolve this conversation a little bit, so that's cool. So that's cool.
That's a good segue.
Good for you. No,
Super
but,
fun.
to evolve this conversation a little bit in the sense of, what are you currently working on and what forecast for 25 is. I just actually this last week sat through a 2025 economic forecast from like an economist, dude. And I call everybody dudes. He was really a smart guy. He's probably not a dude, but to me, he's a dude.
He's a dude.
And it was interesting so you got, like I said, you dive down the nuance of development, you start exploring all this stuff, and it's kind of like mind blowing to me because I'm like, oh man, you don't think about this stuff. But what was interesting was listening to him was he was talking about population, and basically talking about the boomer generation is the largest population of people, and they're all getting to that like extreme retirement age, right? They're going to all start retiring really soon, and the replacement for the boomer generation really is like the millennials, right? To offset the boomers as far as like a workforce, as far as like labor, as far as like, paying taxes, all that kind of stuff. And in the United States, we're actually fairly fortunate because our millennial generation is pseudo close to our boomer generation population wise. So the millennials is a smaller generation than boomers, but it's close, right? And we're talking like millions, so it's not like super close, but if you look in like Europe,
that's their issue right now.
If you look in like Japan, if you look in like Germany, they have like their millennial generation is like drastically lower. Probably because they lost the war. I think winning wars is probably good for your population, but it's around the world much more prevalent to have a millennial generation that's drastically lower than your boomers. But when you start looking at development like this, and you start looking at long-term plays, I think that for like I'm a like Gen Xer, but I'm a child of the 80s. But when I was growing up, and I don't know about you guys, is like I was always hearing that we had like a population problem.
Yeah, too many people.
Every year they're like more and more people, more and more people, more and more people. And so like as a kid, I remember like like kid fears, right? You're like, oh my gosh, like what happens if we start running out of water and food? Like, like you just see this spike in population across the world. And at one point in time, China even put like they had a one kid ban, right? Like they'd only allow their citizens to have one child per household. And there was this big fear around overpopulation. And I think now the inverse is happening,
100%.
right? Like actually people have come out and done the math, and like actually we're at like below replacement rate. For kids, like not just nationwide, but like worldwide. So the replacement rate is like 2.1 children for every couple, right?
Which makes sense. You have two adults.
You got two adults. They have two kids. The replacement rate at that point is like, it's even. It's at zero. Like your population
just to stay the same.
Just to stay the same. And it actually has to be like 2.1. And the guy I was listening to is like, basically that's because like of, immature adult males because they have a way of like offing themselves
well before the average age you should get to.
So it's 2.1, not 2, because a bunch of dummy adult, young adult males are gonna, off themselves. But that's replacement rate. And so to have above replacement rate, you need to have like 2.5, 2.8, 3. And we've been below, I think, 2
for a while.
For I think they're saying like 30 years. So we have a humongous like population problem that's I think heading our way, which I'm curious as to how that's going to play into the real estate world, because we're currently right now in an inventory shortage situation, I think countrywide, nationwide, where we don't have enough housing for people. And so developers and builders are all like, hey, we need to build more housing to create this supply to match this deficit in demand. But over the next probably 10, 15 years, if you do the economics, all these boomers own about 60, I think it's just less than 60% of
homes
of the real estate in the United States. So 60% of all the real estate in the United States is owned by the baby boomer generation. They're all probably in the next 10 or 15 years either going to die or they're going to go into like end of life care. Right? Like not just retirement, but like end of life care. Like, and a lot of times if you're on Medicaid, Medicare, whatever, you can only have a certain amount of money in your bank account, or you have, or they're going to sell their largest asset, which is their house, to pay for end of life care. Right? Hey, I got a house, I own it free and clear, but I'm going to cash out, I'm going to sell it for $400,000, but I need that $400,000 because I'm probably going to live for another 6 or 8 years, but I need like around the clock care or people to come check on me or do all that stuff. So what'll be interesting is like, what happens when 60% of the entire country's real estate hits the market in like a 5-year time period?
Yeah. Well, it's just a correction time period, right? So I listened to this, a really good book. I'll try to drop a link on it. I got to remember the title now, but they were saying the issue that changed was having kids used to be utilitarian. So you had kids because they helped on the farm. So you had 5, 6 of them because that was actually literally your labor force to help grow and populate.
And two of them would get shoved through the combine or the baler or
something would happen, right?
And so you would need like those other 3 to like.
Yeah, and so that, and then now this isn't even offensive, but like now kids are almost like pets.
Well, that's kind of offensive.
I know, it's could be offensive. You can take it, but that's what the guy was saying. He's like, they serve no utility. They're
as
a
far
piece.
as labor utility, yes.
Exactly. So then the idea of having 6, 7, it has to be some piece. And so then he's like, it's a pendulum. You grew up in a big family, so you might have fewer kids. Well, like your kid that grew up in like my daughter, Logan. Logan's probably gonna have 3 or 4 kids because she's like, I don't want my kid to only be the only sibling or the only kid in the family. And so he's like, it's just this pendulum. But the one thing we keep, and it's probably a hotter topic, but the reason the U.S. I think will always be fine too is that we're a place people want to be.
Immigration.
Immigration
is going to save your butt.
Yeah, and we think, hey, we want to close the border. You don't really, because that demand is driven by the fact we're anticipating in migration of immigration.
Right, and an anti-immigration kind of sentiment, I think, was developed, drastically over the last couple of years because we had this kind of open border type policy. But I think that that swings that pendulum to like, oh, we don't like immigration. I think that's, in reality, no, you want immigration.
You want immigration.
You just want it responsibly, right? Like you just want a vetting process. You want to make sure you're not bringing in criminals or, whatever. But you want to make sure that you really want, I'm telling you right now, worldwide, every single country pretty much wants a healthy immigration
policy.
Want
all the people that are coming to the U.S., right? And I think that's the big difference.
And the U.S. is got 2 things in its hip pocket, just so we're not all doom and gloom, is A, we have a millennial generation that's close to our boomer generation, relatively compared to a lot of other countries. We also have kind of like, land of the free, home of the brave. Like we have this calling where there's a lot of people around the world who would like to come to America. So we're like a top destination immigration country.
Vegas.
We're the Vegas of immigration. So we just need to do it responsibly. But if you mix those 2 things, like, responsible immigration, a close millennial generation, and then potentially starting to encourage or incentivize even, right? If you want to get down to it, government can incentivize, there's a lot culturally we can incentivize people having more kids, right? Whether it's tax incentives or whatever, but it's like, hey, maybe we give your 3rd kid free school or something. I don't know. I'm spitballing.
Yeah, but and that's one of the issues though is we also So this is probably the greatest mistake I made over the last 2 years was I thought a building was just the building. Get it built and then you'll be fine because historically that building should be fine, right? And what I missed was that no, there's so many macro external factors you have to be aware of. Otherwise, you're just building a building and you're building the last blockbuster before they shut them all down. And I think when I look at it, it's taking it almost full circle that way is that
that's where I wanted
saddled
to
with
take
student loan debt, right? Mm-hmm. So boomers weren't saddled with student loan debt. And actually, when you went to college as a boomer, you actually had an ROI on what it cost you to go to college. You could go pay 20 grand, get out and get 50, right? And I think, so you have generations, ours, millennial, all the way down to the next ones is you're saddled with student loan debt. You're at home longer. So therefore you can't afford to have kids. And so it's this weird cycle that creates it. So you look at, we lived in London for a little while and I kept thinking, man, why don't more people own homes here? You can't. Right. How that system matured, it naturally forces that piece. And so like not having kids, not having that generation. So I think a good, back to in your hip pocket is like, I think immigration is good for us, but I think it's also that our ability as a democracy to kind of drive people to be entrepreneurs, grow that income piece. But what we've been seeing is that middle class going down. That's your home buying group. That's the piece that if we can find a way to protect it. You really
don't want to become a market where foreign investors are parking money.
No,
right?
No.
Like not in a
because it hurts us. And versus in London, I mean, I'm speculating, but most of them were probably owned by funds at that point. If you're in the heart of
London real estate is.
And so then if you want to
foreign
own
investors looking to make a return on something long term, they're probably vacant or they're getting used as rentals, but they're not even,
Yeah,
they're not.
Because it's a safe play. You can't ever get that again. And I think that's what you're starting to see our market mature to. Is that you just got to look overseas. What I don't want us to get to is that point where now we're having to do like Italy's doing €1 places just to get young families there. Like that's the mistake. So it's almost like if you could learn from what experienced nations have done ahead of us, and be like, okay, look, they got to a point where no kids could be there. Now they're paying the price to get them back there.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, what does that all mean full circle is like when we're designing these buildings, I think there's going to be so much innovation that comes out, whether it's 3D printing, it's different material type for homes, location stacking. There's going to be something that comes out to create some affordability around a place to live. I think apartments are going to be the gap filler for now. But the issue is when you do apartments, which obviously we build them, but is that you don't get that wealth generation tool.
Right.
And think of how many inheritance were handed down because the house was owned free and clear, or how many people owned them. And I think what becomes part of people's retirement strategies is you work in a reverse mortgage.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a pension and you know, hey, my values are going to hold. I think values are going up again already. They're anticipated. But like now all of a sudden you're meeting with your financial advisor. It's like, okay, well at 65, we're going to go do a reverse mortgage on your property. And it just becomes part of it. So then what happens with that, right? It helps that person for sure who worked hard, got the house, but then the next generation doesn't get a leg up. And so it's just this thing that used to hand down and pass down so easily is now not a tool that future generations can use.
Well, and I do think there needs to be some reform in like the estate taxes and the death taxes as well. I mean, it's again, you know, school of hard knocks, live and learn. But as I've gotten older, you start realizing like, I think Washington State might be one of the highest, but I think it's like 22% or something like that. So for like those listeners that don't know, right? Like I could own a house free and clear. Like say I own $1 million property and I die and I gift it to my daughter. I say, hey, I want my daughter to have this house. I own it free and clear. I've paid for it. There's absolutely zero balance on it. And the state's going to go, great. So your daughter just got $1 million property and now she's going to have to pay the state a 22%, I'm making this up, a 20-ish% transfer tax. So my daughter now has to give the state $200,000 so that she can have her dad's $1 million property that's owned free and clear.
Or so this is where farmers get hurt the most.
But if she can't clear that, right? Or if I don't have a life insurance policy or something, then now she has to sell the property because she still has to pay that $200,000 no matter what.
Correct.
So I gave it to her, but I gave her a $200,000 bill with it. And now she's like, well, I can't do that. So now I got to sell the property. So I'm just going to sell the property. It's $1 million property. She's going to net whatever, 800, but now she's got to give 200 to the state. Now she has 600 grand where she can just go buy something, but she's not going to have the property that her dad paid out free and clear. And it's worth $1 million. Yeah. And it's actually, it's quite daunting when you start to look at actual like estates. Yeah. We're not talking about one property, but if you look at, you know, somebody who owns rental properties or owns land or something like that, like you said, farmers, it's impossible for the heirs to pay off. You know, if you're farming 15,000 acres
you can't.
in Montana, how is your son or your daughter, or even the person that you're trying to hand the farm to, you're going to be able to like come up with $3 million to hand the government the day you die?
Well, and so I don't want to be a spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but if you haven't seen it yet, that means you don't care. But the Yellowstone finale, that's literally what it's about. John Dutton passed away, and all of a sudden the tax bill on whatever is 50,000 acres of
and
developable
that was
land.
The premise of the finale, but I don't know a lot of people got it.
No, and so literally, what did they do? So what did they do to bypass it? They took better. They sold it, but they sold it at what the base rate was of whatever it was, like $125,000, and so then there was no tax owed, and then the new basis for
there was tax owed on
on the 125,
right?
But it was more than that. But like that's the idea. And so to get around it, but that family, if they didn't have that option, would have just lost it.
Yeah.
Or had to sell the whole thing off. And then the issue is it's not like you get 10 years to sell it off. So
no.
I'm kind of, I don't know, that'll be interesting to see, but I think it's one of those pieces where you got to be aware of those as you're trying to grow wealth and build businesses, especially.
Well, and as a country, I think we have to be aware of it because like you were saying, it doesn't really, you know, otherwise, like you said, someone goes and gets a reverse mortgage because they go, well, I'm going to have to suck the money out of this thing while I'm still kind of alive. Right. And then everyone loses, right? Like that house ends up going back to the state or ends up getting sold to someone else. The kids don't really get anything. And this person doesn't pass anything on because they're like, well, it's not worth it anyway to like try to gift it to them and then have to pay the taxes. And
I bet there's a fund out there right now, Blackstone style, that's putting together a large fund to purchase reverse mortgage properties. Right? They already discounted it. So you're just coming in, taking it. Nobody wants the headache of dealing with paying that off. Probably accrued more interest than you wanted to, but it works for the purpose they have it, right? It just depletes that. inheritance piece that I think has allowed us to grow fast. That's what's allowed the next generation to be smarter than the generation before and ahead of the generation before. Was you're able to transfer assets. Like think of this leg up you got versus your dad when you started farming there, and that was even in the family. Well, before when you're starting, but like you're not literally creating the farm. You have the equipment, you have the setup. You're running and you're making the business better. Like on mine, this is I'm first person new development, so I have to create every system. Right. Well, when Logan, I think she'll be a vet or something, but like let's say she wanted to jump in, she doesn't have to create any of those.
Right.
She just jumps on top of that and grows it probably 10x what I could do. That's what's even crazier because now she can be efficient versus creating. And I think it's going to be super interesting to watch how all that wealth is transferred for one. It's got to be transferred somehow. Right.
Yeah.
And then how that plays itself out in kind of maintaining, providing, growing some kind of middle class that.
Well, I'm interested to see what it does economically for the country and for the people where that wealth is exchanging hands. I'm also interested to see what it does for the market in general.
Yeah.
And the supply and demand equation.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the reason that we have a supply and demand issue is because we have, people are coming out of an era of historically low interest rates. Correct. And so you got all the people that bought in the last 5 to 7 years don't really want to exchange properties. Mm-hmm. Not because their families aren't growing or they don't want a nicer property, but because they got a rate that's 2-3%. Yeah. And then you have another big chunk of the supply that's owned by boomers. Yep. Who, are living out the rest of their days on a reverse mortgage or correct. Literally, don't want to exchange hands because they're not to that point. So between the boomers and between the people who have the low rates, there's just not many people that are transacting. Yeah. And so a lot of the supply is then coming from new construction, correct. New product, new development. Yep. And I'm curious as to see how that affects the development world, the new construction world, and the supply and demand ratio when you have all these boomers starting to sell. And if you have people where these rates start to expire or start to lapse. So happy about this, like mathematically to be within the same 5 or 10 year period, right? Because you got a 30-year mortgage. Yep. Those people are probably 5 years in right now, 6 years in potentially. So they got 25 years. And based on the stats that this economist was talking about, he's like, yeah, you're looking at 15 years before these boomers start going to end of life care exchanging. So you have this 15 to 20 year period.
But think about take your life, 15 years, right? Sounds like it is a blip in the historical radar, but take your life from 25 to 40, you couldn't afford a property.
If you couldn't?
We couldn't.
Right.
Nobody can. Nobody starting out can responsibly.
Yeah, I mean, it takes like dual income, no kids.
And commitment,
yeah.
Right? And I think that's what we're missing is like take a 15-year chunk, like your prime 25. I mean, that's a big chunk of people's lives. And so now at 41, they're finally selling. And you're trying to decide, hey, do we buy? What do we do? But the hard part is that what everyone would expect is the market just falls because of it. And I'm like, no, still hold its value there because replacement costs are up that high. And I think that's, as long as you're in an area that's growing, right? That's the other thing. There's parts of the country that are having out migration because people want to get out of there. Yeah. And so those areries you'll see price reduction. But that's why you'll see the price reduction.
See a lot of that in the Midwest.
Yeah. Versus in Spokane, our area, I just don't. It's just there's no crazy natural disasters. We have great power, great water, great recreational activities, and then now our airports grow. I mean, great connectivity.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I guess it's all speculation. What happens to the kind of the breadbasket of the United States because people are moving east, west, and south.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
There's not a lot of people moving to Midwest,
South Dakota,
or even like Central. And again, a lot of that ground is also farm ground. Yes. So you have that kind of trifecta of there's not a ton of sights and sounds and things to see. It's a massive amount of farm and agricultural ground. And then you're getting this position where basically like there's not a lot of influx, there's a lot of outflux, and there's a lot of land. Yeah. And a lot of it's corporate owned land.
Yep. Yeah, it should be super interesting. I think it just goes to like so now all of our apartments, we're dialing in the amenities because I think that's what's going to draw people now. And I think you're starting to look at how do you, knowing that maybe elevators make a ton more sense because I can attract a whole different population if I just put elevators in, even if it's 3 stories or 4 stories. Yeah. Can I get the rent to justify it? And I think it just makes you want to think, you have to think that 5-7 year ahead. Because let's say, Peyton's a good example. I've had that for a year and a half and I'm another year and a half. So that's I have to predict 3 to 5 years in the future. of what that looks like.
Who the end buyer is going to be, or who the end tenant is going to be. Yeah, user.
And I think that's kind of where it gets super interesting in this game. And I think some of the misses have been in, I could have swore the rates would come down. And then now I'm watching them and I'm like, well, they can't come down that much because inflation's already ticking up and the rates are up.
Yeah.
Like,
what I don't like about this whole thing, and this is totally just me being selfish, is that I'm 44, and I'm like, if I go out 15 to 20 years, right, I'm like 60.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with that shit when I'm 60.
No, you don't.
I don't want to see this big shift happen when I'm like 60 years old.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in a world of hurt trying to adapt to that.
Well, and you won't, because you're going to be predicting, right? It's not like you wake up in 15 years and adapt. I think the other big one we're not factoring in is all the businesses, right? What makes a middle class work is you have this diversity of businesses, but as they come up for sale and only the big people keep buying them and absorbing those in, I think that was another way we could bolster local economies, especially, was having that mid-sized business, small business, basically. And as they're retiring, people aren't set up to transition them. So one of them I want to get on here and do an interview with is like somebody that helps businesses prepare to sell. From your books to how you set up the company to how you do those things. Because my father-in-law, basically by the time we got there, we hadn't prepared any of that. And so it was hard to determine the value of the business. So you spent 36 years building a business.
And you're trying to figure out how much it's worth and selling it in 6 months.
Yeah. And we did that little exercise with the EXP move that we did. And I'm like, how do you value it?
Right.
How do you value it? I mean, because I remember all the hours I put in, sweat, tears, and all that, but like nobody on the other side cares.
No.
It's what's it worth? What does it produce? And I think that if most people can do that instead of, hey, I'm going to do cash on these deals. Well, maybe you don't 3 years prior to selling. So you show the actual revenue the company made. And I think there's just some of those pieces. I think that humans are so adaptable and resilient that I think that'll be kind of where people move to. But I think if I was starting out again, or at least I told my daughter, I'm like, I think one of the better moves would be to pick up, if that's the route you want to go, pick up an existing business. Go in, work with them, work in there for 3 to 4 years, and then try to buy it.
I don't know if you've read that book by Cody Sanchez.
Yeah, I haven't yet. You recommended it last time. I haven't read it yet, but
it was interesting. It's a good read, but she talks specifically about that. Is just like, hey, a lot of the new age entrepreneurial endeavor of like go out and have your creative idea and start your own business. You're better off actually going and finding that business that's been in business for 25 or 30 years and working with the current owner to transition over a period of time, and it can be a win-win for both of you, right? Like that person actually gets the cash out of their business or sell it at some point in time to a responsible person to run it, but you're going to go into like pseudo systems experience.
You get that level up that would have been passed down if it would have been in your family, right? And you get to grab that piece and then provide value to the guy or lady who's selling you the business. And I think that's where I think there's a way, and it's just about education, awareness, and those to even know that's possible. And I don't think everybody should run a business. Sometimes I don't even know why I run a business, but I think there are those kind of opportunities within them, whether you're building in a system or you're building your own system with it, is that it's starting to look for that new way to do it. I don't know. I'm excited. I think circling it all the way up is like, no, I'm still pretty optimistic. I think watching how we adapt to everything from COVID to increased cost to build to everything.
Yeah,
right?
it's easy to get negative, but I really don't think it's a negative thing. No. I think it's just one of those. What I was alluding to initially, and what I think is cool about these conversations is it just brings full circle, like it's adulting, man.
It's adulting.
It's adulting, dude. We're
so true.
We're adulting now.
We are adults.
You know, like, why was my parents' generation always like yakking around? But you know, as you start adulting, it's like, you do start paying attention to these markers of just it's oversimplistic and almost ignorant to think that you can go into any business now and just focus on your craft.
Correct.
But that's a lot of times what we want to do.
Yeah.
Hey man, I just developed real estate. I just want to like go build projects and like mind my own business and keep my head down and not really get overly involved. And like, I don't care about like the state of the world or what's going on. And then you pick your head up and it's that whole like chestnut checkers, right? Concept of like, no, you kind of actually have to look at the chessboard, right? Like you got to zoom out and you got to look at the whole picture. And there's pieces moving around that if you kind of bury your head in the sand, then what I find is that if you ignore a lot of this stuff, your success becomes more whimsical and like related to luck or related to like living in the right time or the right place or being in the right business. And hey, if that works for you, but it's also hard to look back and say like, well, I played the game at a high level. I really knew what I was doing. And it's like, no, you just got lucky. You weren't really paying attention. You kind of, so for me, as I've gotten older, like this part of this adulting is like, hey man, it's important, right? Like educating kids is important. Like replacement rates are important. Like supply and demand is important. Like politics are important. Like getting involved at the community level is important. And so,
well, and that's what I've started doing more. It's probably the thing I would advise more people to do. Was I was just naive and thought I could just go in and create it, didn't need help. Hey, just because you put bricks and built this building doesn't mean that's how I'm going to do it my way. And some of it worked, but to your point, it worked a lot because the market worked a lot.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like strategically reaching out to all the developers and builders and people in Spokane that are like, have done it. They've seen that cycle, and it's easy coming into a cycle thinking, nope, this one's different. I'm like, well, it's not really. It's just a different set of problems, but the foundational elements of how to get through them, how to solve it, how to move forward, they're there. And so that's kind of been a fun little. I mean, some of them will be on the podcast with us because you just go sit in those conversations and you realize that if you're willing to listen, there is so much wisdom to be passed down that you don't have to learn it the hard way. Like, I mean, I probably could have shaved a year off the stuff I'm going through just to get. If I would have been able to have that conversation now, would I have listened?
Yeah, would you have listened?
That's its own podcast episode, right? And so, but I think that's one piece that it'll be super exciting to see if that moves. You're already seeing trade schools tick up. You're seeing kind of that involvement back in there, and it's just pendulums. That's all I realized. All life is pendulum, and we as humans overcorrect. Like you go after it. And so you're going to move that pendulum until it gets all the way here. And then it's going to swing even further back this way. And I think the more we can do these things where you're raising awareness or learning through it, so you don't make the same mistakes, I think that's kind of the goal.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that we are in a bit of a revolution, I believe, technology wise, right? And specifically with like AI and with technology and with digital media where, there's that shift between like the agricultural and industrial revolution that happened, right? When like tractors were created and when factories were created, and we kind of transitioned from like a feudal system to like more of a capitalistic type system. And it's easy now to study history and to look back on that and study economics or history and look at like, hey man, like that was a real shift globally. But yet what was it like to live through it? And people think like it didn't just happen overnight, right? Like, and you actually start studying like, well, the time that, they invented a tractor that would replace a horse to the time where like tractors replace horses was like a 15 or a 20-year period, right? So I think we're in one of those shifts though. I think we're in one of those shifts with construction and development, but I also think we're in one of those shifts economically with technology and with AI and some of the stuff that's coming out where the world's going to change. It's going to change quite a bit, I think, in the next 10 or 15 years. But it's not going to happen. Like 10 or 15 years still, it's a slower change. Right?
It's a slower change.
It's not overnight, but it is going to change. And leading that back to the population conversation with the economist that we were talking to is like, I don't know, like one of the other things he brought up that I thought was really interesting, and we kind of wrapped this up here, but like he was talking about how, I believe it was like 60 years ago, there was 5 or 6 working class people for every one retiree.
Oh, wow.
Right? So there's 5 people that had jobs for one person retired. Right now, we're at like between 3.5 to 4. So like right now, there's like 3.5 people working to every one retired person. By 2035, it's going to go to like 2 to 1.
Yeah.
And so you have this issue of like, well, going back to immigration or going back to encouraging people to have kids, where I think that AI actually can be a humongous solution there. And a lot of people are scared of it, or they think, AI is going to take a lot of people's jobs or do it. It's like, well, it kind of needs to. Yeah. Because if right now there's 3.5 or 4 people working for every one retiree, and in like another 10 or 15 years, there's only going to be 2 people, those 2 people better be able to do like 2 people's jobs to even keep the ratio the same.
Yeah. Well, it's so true. And you're also thinking people are living longer. There was a point the average age, or not average age, the like life expectancy was like 36 years old. But like think about Social Security was built when life expectancy was probably 72.
I think it was probably lower than that.
What do you think so? Yeah. So, but I'm
probably like
you're feeding
like
into a
late
system.
50s, early 60s when it was first built. It was because it was Roosevelt that did that, right? No, it was.
I don't want to misquote that, but like think about this. So you've fed this. You could retire at 60 and be alive for another 35 years.
Yeah. And not only that, but you're alive for 35 years. And that's what the economist was getting at. Is like, listen, people think, somebody who's working has to essentially kind of support the person who's not working, whether it's directly or indirectly through tax dollars and through programs. But that can only happen, right, if they're working. But they used to have to do it for like 5 or 6 years before this person passed away. Now it's like, well, now they might live for 30 years. So not only is the ratio going from like 4-to-1 to 2-to-1, it's those one retirees are not just living 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. They're living 20 years. They're living 25 years. And so what happens is it actually makes a scenario where it's hard for the economy itself to grow. Yeah. Like the entire, GDP of a country cannot grow because you don't have enough of the labor force to create the goods to even have a quality GDP. Correct. Right. And so it's an interesting scenario. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I only say that because I think AI and technology right now is definitely I'm seeing a revolution in the industry. I agree. Of I think almost every industry.
All of them, right? And they're going to come make it more efficient, allow us to do more with less. And I think that's kind of the motto of all these revolutions.
Yeah, and a great quote, and I don't know who said it, but I loved it, was somebody said, everyone's worried about AI taking people's jobs. The reality is it's the person who knows how to use AI well that's going to take someone else's job. Yes.
Yeah, so the job transforms.
It's not AI that's going to take your job. Correct. It's somebody else who knows how to use AI well that's going to take your job. Correct. Because an employer or a business owner is going to be like, this person's capacity is so much higher. Correct. And so really it's just becoming something that people need to, like, just like at one point in time, learning how to drive a tractor was probably like, everybody else knows how to ride a horse. Yeah. This guy over here can drive a tractor.
Yeah, we want him. We want Keith over here.
Right? We want the tractor driving guy. That's funny. And so AI is a little bit the same, but.
Yeah. Well, I kind of love these conversation ones, but if you have any specific questions we should answer on our next Q&A one, send them in. I think probably the best way is through Instagram, or we don't have an email.
DM.
DM and just send them in. We like chatting through them, and I think sometimes they're nuanced and there's variables to them, but it's fun like having the conversation, I think. So
For sure. And it opens up a lot of new conversations.
Correct. I agree. Yeah. Spurred off 4 more I had in my head. So,
well, thanks for listening today, guys. And I'm going to ask you to do us a huge favor. If the next 30 seconds you could like or subscribe on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, or YouTube while you're listening to the show, we'd greatly appreciate it. And if you like the episode, give it a like. Furthermore, if you could give us a 5-star review, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Until next time. All right, you guys, thanks for listening to today's episode. While you're out there, would you please do us a favor and give us a like, subscribe, or a follow, whether you listen on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube? We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you don't mind while you're there, give us a 5-star review. Maybe write a review. If you have a favorite episode, feel free to give it a like. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it.